Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Diamond Tips. I'm Candy Poo, and today we're going to talk about lane momentum. Lane momentum is something that isn't talked about very often, and it typically isn't something that is mentioned when people are asking for tips for climbing the ladder, but I think it's an incredibly undervalued skill. Without proper knowledge of lane momentum, you'll find yourself losing lanes harder than you should, or not being able to capitalize on an early lead and snowball your advantage. With knowledge of lane momentum, you'll be able to bully people in lanes where it wouldn't otherwise be possible, or survive tough matchups easier. This will be a guide on bot lane primarily, but some of these concepts can be applied to other lanes as well. The first concept I want to talk about is what I'll call the monster wave shove. The idea is that you want to keep the minions in your advantage, but you don't want to push a lane right away. This serves two purposes. First, if the enemy lane wants to start a fight with you, you'll have more minion damage on your side and be able to pull ahead because of that. Second, it creates a monster wave consisting of around 3 waves on the enemy tower. If you're an LCS watcher, you'll recognize this strategy from TSM's patented 3-man dives during the beginning of LCS. The strategy isn't only good if you're going for the dive though. Not only does it make it hard for the enemy AD to last to under tower, but it also allows you to harass him without counterattack. There's a bit of a safety net against ganks too, because if their jungler ganks while there's a monster wave on their tower, their AD risks losing tons of experience and gold to the point where it's hardly even worth it for him to go for the kill. This is also pretty common in late game scenarios where Baron is the game deciding objective. For example, if you hard shove a lane, it'll get to the enemy tower with about 4 to 5 minions in probably 30 seconds. But if you create a monster wave by killing 2 of the enemy minions and leaving the rest, it'll form a 3-wave monster that gets to the enemy tower in about a minute. Sure, it takes longer, but it poses a much larger risk for the enemy team. Do they save their tower, or do they go for Baron? The answer is typically Baron, so you end up getting a free tower off of it. The second concept is what I'll simply call the hard shove. You hear professional players say it all the time in their streams. For example, I'm going to hard shove bot then head to dragon. In laning phase, it has a few distinct advantages. First, it keeps a minion and experience advantage in your favor, and like the monster wave shove, it allows you to easily trade with your lane opponent. Second, it forces the enemy to sit on their tower and takes away a lot of their vision. For example, if you're on blue side and continuously hard shove the lane, it's going to be really hard for the purple side support to get a ward in your tri-brush or far lane brush, making it much easier to perform a lane gank on quick notice since you won't be taking as much time to prep a monster wave. Third, if the enemy lane backs before you do, it gives you a free ticket to hard shove to their tower and force them to miss a full wave of experience and gold. This is extremely common for junglers to do after they gank. In later stages of the game, hard shoving serves one main purpose: map control. For example, in the example I gave earlier, creating a monster wave might get you more tower pressure, but it takes longer for it to happen. Hard shoving a lane is more immediate and gives you the map vision you need quickly. You also get a bit more immediate gold from hard shoving, so that's nice too. Personally, I prefer creating monster waves because it forces the enemy into a panic state, but that's just me. Try to find what works best for you. The third concept is freezing the lane, which most people are probably familiar with already. Freezing a lane is when you aim to keep the enemy wave slightly larger than yours so it pushes onto you, and then you keep the wave just outside your tower's range so the wave continues to push on you. The objective is to keep the enemy AD close to your tower, opening him up to easier ganks and try to zone him from getting last hits on the minions. There are a few reasons why this doesn't work very well in bot lane during the laning phase. First, unlike top lane, there will always be at least one ranged champion in the lane, so it's incredibly easy to shove the lane to tower. Second, unless you're incredibly far ahead, you open yourself up to a huge amount of poke damage, because you'll have to tank minion damage on top of champion damage to freeze the wave. Third, bot lane will always have tons of wards, so freezing the lane doesn't really open them up to ganks. And lastly, having the enemy wave at your tower for a prolonged period of time leaves you open to easy lane ganks. All that being said, there is a place for freezing lanes. If either your tower or the enemy's tower is down, you can freeze the wave near your tower to make it incredibly dangerous for the enemy AD to attempt to farm that far up the lane. This allows the enemy AD to roam and help his team around the map, but if you're really far behind, sometimes it's better to tell your team to play defensively while you catch up on farm. The second option is when you're incredibly far ahead in the lane and you and your support are able to zone the enemy lane away from the creeps completely. This is really uncommon and it's typically advised to take the tower and roam with your team instead, but this is always an option if you're uncomfortable doing that or simply want to get really far ahead of the enemy AD. Now that we know about the general concepts of lane momentum, let's try to apply our knowledge to some matchups and figure out what we should aim to do. If you're the Caitlyn or Sona, you're going to look to either create a monster wave or simply hard shove the lane. Draven has potential to outtrade Caitlyn in small bursts because of his spinning axes, but if you keep the minion advantage on your side, it'll be incredibly hard for him to deal with. Draven players will almost always look to shove the lane because they want the experience advantage and the ability to force trades, but Caitlyn should be able to outpush a Draven fairly easily, even with a Lulu helping him. Keep in mind that if you both leave the lane 0-0-0, Caitlyn will generally be in better shape than Draven, so play safe and keep the momentum in your favor. If you're the Varus or Lulu, you absolutely have to push the lane immediately or you'll get poked down due to blue side double golem advantage and minion advantage. What I suggest is to start pushing the wave as soon as you get to lane with a charged up piercing arrow and glitter lance across all the minions. It'll take a few seconds longer for Caitlyn and Sonya to get to lane because of double golems, so you should be able to get a head start on the shove. Blue side Caitlyn is incredibly devastating, so it's important that you're able to outplay her mentally by having sufficient knowledge of the lane momentum. Once you both hit 6, look to start a fight and come out ahead with your 2 power ultimates. So far my advice has been push your lane and win, so I want to take this example from a different standpoint. Let's assume that your opponent knows that shoving the tower is the best option. How do you deal with it? If you're playing Ezreal or Sona in this example, there is no possible way you can even dream of out-shoving a Graves Lulu lane. The best thing you can do is continue to last hit a tower and try to pink ward your tri-brush whenever possible. This will allow your jungler to gank bottom easier and will force the enemy Lulu to either 1. Counter pink tri-brush, which doesn't hurt you too much in the grand scheme of things, or 2. Use your pink ward on the lane brush so her jungler is able to gank easier. If she pinks the lane brush, you have to be aware of lane ganks. Constantly throw mystic shots into the brush to make sure there's no one inside, and look for telltale signs like Graves and Lulu only last hitting instead of shoving the lane. Graves Lulu is a counter lane to Ezreal Sona, so just try to keep your composure and go even because Ezreal is typically more impactful in the later stages of the game than Graves. And that'll wrap it up for this episode of Diamond Tips. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know in the comment section below. If these kinds of videos are helpful to you, please let your friends know about them too. Until next time.